Morning, church. It's good to see everyone here this morning. We appreciate your presence and want to welcome those of you who are worshiping with us via live stream as well. We're glad you're here. It was on August 9th, 1970, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at the Andover Church of Christ in Andover, Kansas, that Carol Lynn Perkey and Daniel Eugene Rouse stood before Max Reed and promised to love and to cherish, for better, for worse, for rich, for poor, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Doesn't seem like it's been 50 years. It's amazing how elastic time is, isn't it? How time drags at times, and at other times, time just flies. And in many ways, time has just flown. I ask you to indulge me for just a second, though. I want to reflect a little bit on this. First of all, if you've been blessed with a godly mate, if you've been blessed with someone who's walking hand in hand with you as you walk toward heaven, please don't ever forget what a tremendous gift that is. That is a gift from God. That's the case. Don't take that gift ever. Take that gift for granted. One of the great privileges I believe that we enjoy in life, one of the tremendous blessings that is ours, is that not only do we get to love someone in the bond of marriage, but sometimes I think the word love is inadequate, doesn't quite express the depth of what we feel. And I really like the word cherish. It's a beautiful thing to be able to cherish someone. And not only to be able to cherish them, but to be cherished by them. And I just pray that in your life, in the life of everybody, there will be that opportunity to really cherish someone and to be cherished by them. That picture that's in the Connect newsletter, that's 50 years and 50 pounds ago. You grow in more ways than one over the years. You do. And there have been some who have said, oh, you guys were just 18 when you got married. Carol was just barely 18. I'd been 18 a whole 8 months at that point. Let me tell you something. I would not take for growing up together. I wouldn't. That was an incredible blessing. I mean, when you're both 18, you're 500 miles away from home. There's nobody who's a relative of yours who's even close. You either bond or it's a mess. And that bonding, that working together, that forming your life together, I wouldn't take for. You know, conventional wisdom now is, you know, you got to finish college and you got to start your career and all that before you get married. And there is some wisdom to that. I would argue at the same time, there's also a lot of drawbacks to that. A lot of sexual immorality, a lot of temptations, a lot of ways that come with that aren't healthy and aren't good. When you find that person, and what is mature anyway? I think there are people at 18 that are a lot more mature than a lot of people at 28. I really do think the key is that you bind yourself to someone and you get to grow together. This woman sitting here today, this beautiful lady, is not the girl I married. She's a much improved version of the girl I married. And I loved the girl I married. But I've got to watch her grow for 50 years and mature. And you don't grow apart unless you choose to. You grow together. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to grow together and to mature together. Again, it's a blessing that we should never take for granted. And lastly, when I was 18, I could not imagine being 68. And I couldn't imagine being married for 50 years. That was forever. Savor the time. God's given us 50 years. I am so thankful for that. I don't know if He'll give us 51. I don't know. You don't know. None of us know how much time we've got. I could not encourage you enough. If you've been blessed to cherish someone, savor that time. Every minute of it. Appreciate it for the blessing that it is, because you don't know how long you'll have it. And one day you won't. I mean, that's just a fact of life. That's the way it is. Shortly after we moved here, Big Butto Perry. Those of you who, a lot of you remember Big Butto and Selena. Both had had long marriages. Both have been, Selena had been widowed for a long time. Butto, a relatively short time. They found each other. They married. Man, I loved watching those two together. Because they found each other in the winter of life, and they savored each other. No question about that. He called me one day. He said, would you and Carol take us up? We're going to celebrate our anniversary. They celebrated their anniversary every month. They did. He said, I know we don't have that many years together. We are going to celebrate our anniversary every month. That taught me something I've never forgotten. How important it is that we really do appreciate each other and savor each other and enjoy the time that we have together, because it really, really is a gift. So I would just encourage you to thank God for your mates, and thank God for the time that you're able to share together and the lives you're able to build together, and what an incredible blessing that is. Okay, I've pontificated enough. Let's preach a little bit. We're going to talk today about wisdom from above. If it moves, which it's not. Okay, I don't have to have that up there, but if we get it, that'll be fine. Open your Bibles, please, James chapter 3. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, if you'll just click for me. James is going to begin. Here we are in the middle of the book, okay? This is the middle of James. And I don't think it's accidental that in the middle of James, in the middle of this letter, that James is going to stop and he's going to focus now on what in reality is in many ways the theme of the whole book, which is living in a wise way. Living in a way that's given to you by God. And as he gets here in the middle of the book, he's going to stop and he's going to talk about a wisdom that is from beneath and a wisdom that is from above. Starkly contrasting wisdoms in verses 13 through 18. And I want us to begin by looking at a question and a challenge that he poses in verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? There's the question. Now here's the challenge. By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. Now, the word wise here in the Greek is sophos. And it's fascinating how to the Greek, sophos was a two-edged sword. And I think it's important to understand that, because James is really going to stress this. We're familiar with the word philosopher. Do you understand that's rooted in the Greek? Phileo, love, sophos, wisdom. A philosopher is a lover of wisdom. It was a wonderful thing, the Greeks believed, to be in love with wisdom and to seek after wisdom and to live your life wisely. That was a great thing. But there was also a problem. And the problem was that with sophos, with wisdom, it was possible to fall into what they called sophistry. Because today we get words like sophisticated and a sophist from that word, sophos. Now, to be a sophist was to use logic, to use reason, to use wisdom in a bad way, in a fallacious way. Young man gets caught peeking over on the girl's desk beside him while they're taking a test, and the teacher says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm just making sure that she gets the answer correct. We've been studying together, and I'm real concerned that she might miss that one, and I just want to see that she's getting it right." Sophistry. That was a real danger that people could fall into, and it's a real danger today. It's always been a danger. You can use or misuse wisdom. Now notice what James says. He says, prove your wisdom like you prove your faith. Back in chapter 2, verse 18, show me your faith without your works what? I'll show you my faith by my works. And in essence, that's exactly what he's saying here now. If you're wise, demonstrate your wisdom. Live in a wise way. And it's interesting that he ends this beginning introduction to wisdom by talking about the meekness of wisdom. True wisdom really isn't abusive or arrogant. And I think it's very revealing that he talks about how there is a meekness to wisdom. Now, we've talked about meekness before, and I want you to keep in mind, please, meekness is not weakness, all right? The world just got that messed up. To be meek is not to be weak. The word meek literally means power under control. And I like to picture that by this lioness who's playing with her cubs. And she's got this huge paw. And with that paw, she bats those cubs around and she plays with them. And with that paw, she could break the neck of a wildebeest. Bam! She's incredibly powerful. But that power is under control when she's playing with the cubs. Meek, power under control. Somebody who's wise, somebody who has knowledge and experience and has developed insight, can they use that to take advantage of somebody less experienced, less wise, with less insight? Sure they can. Can they misuse that wisdom? Can they use that wisdom to their own advantage? If it's an ungodly kind of wisdom, they sure can. Absolutely. But James says, if you have wisdom from above, I want you to demonstrate your wisdom by using the power that you have in a positive way, in a way that blesses the lives of others. And I would add to that something that I think ties in closely, although it's not found here, and that is that wisdom's humble. Somebody who's arrogant thinks they know it all, right? They have all the answers. They're on top of it. And we kind of live in a day and age where people like to strut their stuff, don't they? Man, we kind of glorify arrogant people. The problem with that arrogance is nobody begins to even be close to knowing it all. I mean, you talk about an expert. What's an expert? An expert, somebody who knows a whole lot about a very little, right? And you have somebody who's an expert in nuclear physics, and they don't know how to change the oil in their car, but they're an expert. The fact of the matter is, wise people know what they don't know. I've been blessed to know a lot of wise men, a lot of wise women. I've never met an arrogant, godly, wise man or wise woman. They're humble. They may know a lot. They're very aware of what they don't know. That's godly wisdom. Now, James goes on to discuss earthly wisdom and godly wisdom. Wisdom from above. This is what he says about earthly wisdom in verses 14 through 16. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above. It's earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Now, let's take that and break that down. Earthly wisdom. Let's talk about its source. Let's talk about how it manifests itself. And let's talk about its results, because that's what James does here. What's its source? He says its source is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Now, if I tell you, there's a new video game out there, but this video game glorifies the demonic. This video game is full of sensuality. Are you going to go buy that for your kids? Man, I would pray not. I hope not. If somebody warns you and tells you that something has its source in hell, that its source is demonic, that its source is evil, its source is ugly, its source is unspiritual, why would you want any part of it? Should it not just repulse you and turn you off and turn you away? I think it should. Years ago, I started reading a book by Stephen King called Pet Sematary. I got a little ways into Pet Sematary, and I literally tore that book up. Literally tore it apart and threw it in the trash. I thought, man, I don't want this in my head. Demonic, evil, ugly. I don't want it. I don't need it. Doesn't need to be a part of me. That kind of stuff needs to repulse us, turn us off, turn us away. And James is saying, I want you to understand, man, no holds barred here. I want you to understand up front, there's an earthly wisdom, and I want you to understand its source, and its source is ugly. You don't want any part of it. Now, how does it manifest itself? It manifests itself in bitter jealousy and selfish ambition. James will repeat himself twice about that, verse 14 and again in verse 16. Bitter jealousy, selfish ambition. Now think about that for a second. Bitter jealousy. Jealousy and envy are kissing cousins. But to be jealous is to see something and want that. Okay? And that's not necessarily bad. God will describe himself as a jealous God. Okay? It's kind of a neutral thing. Envy is ugly. Envy says, you've got something and I hate you for it. You've got something, and if there is some way that I could wrest it away from you and take it away from you, I would in a second. Cain killed Abel out of envy. In the book of Matthew, chapter 27 and verse 18, Jesus was killed by the Sanhedrin because they envied him. What does earthly wisdom produce? It produces bitter jealousy. Bitter jealousy. Now I want you to listen to the rhetoric out there today. And what are we hearing constantly? from earthly wise people. You need to hate them because they're a different color than you are. You need to hate them because they've got more than you do. You need to resent them because they hold this position and you don't. Don't we hear that all the time? Isn't that constantly being railed out there? Listen to James. That's from the devil. That divides, that tears apart. That is ripping at the very fabric of our society. It is. And along with that, what have we got? Selfish ambition. Because any wisdom that comes from beneath is automatically going to be tied to self. It's going to be incredibly narcissistic, solipsistic. It's all going to be about me. It's not going to be about you. And just look at all the arguments that are going on today. They're all tied up. Well, it's my right to. Forget anybody else's welfare. Forget anybody else's good. You see, it's all about me and what I want. Just look at what's going on in Washington right now. We've got millions of people who, through no fault of their own, none, have lost their jobs. Millions of people who were working hard, doing what they were supposed to do, showing up on time, building the best whatever it was or delivering the best service they could, and this lousy virus shut down the business. And they can't work. And it's not their fault. It's not their fault. They're not lazy. They're not sloughing off. They're not trying to sponge off anybody. But they still, man, how are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to buy food for your family? How are you going to take care of insurance? How are you going to provide the necessities of life? You've lost your job. And we've got 535 people up there, all pontificating and all, we're so concerned about these folks. They could fix it like that. They could provide for those people. They're talking about how they don't care for those people. I'm sorry. They don't. Because if they did, they'd take care of it. They're all concerned about power. They're concerned about winning. They're concerned about the next election. They're concerned about coming out on top. They're not concerned about helping people. If they were, they would. The proof's in the pudding, folks. Words are cheap. Actions are what matter, right? Selfish ambition. Why is this country in the mess that it's in? Just look up and look around and see what's going on. And tell me that a lot of the problem isn't that we're being led by people whose wisdom is rooted in the earthly and the sensual and the demonic. Not in the wisdom that's from above. And what's that result in? It results in disorder and every vile practice. Well, boy, we don't see any of that today, do we? Why, there's no disorder in the streets. There's no advocacy. Can you think of anything vile right now that's not being pushed? That's not being advocated by somebody? That's not being advertised? Why? Well, because look at its source. That's what's going to happen. That's what's inevitably going to follow. Now, let's look at something so much better. Wisdom that is from above. Verses 17 and 18, James made reference to it in verse 13. Now he comes back to it in verses 17 and 18. The wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Now, what's the source of wisdom? This godly wisdom. It is from above. This is wisdom that is divinely sourced. And as we've talked about, you talk about opposite points of origin. Earthly wisdom comes from hell. Godly wisdom comes from heaven. This is wisdom that is from above. This is wisdom that is designed to make your life better. This is the wisdom that is designed to make the lives of those about you better. This is a wisdom that is going to ensure you the possibility of a life filled with joy, a life filled with peace, a life quite the opposite from the kind of life that wisdom from beneath is going to provide for you. How's it going to manifest itself? It's going to manifest itself, first of all, he says, in purity. Notice, is first pure. Wisdom from above is first pure. Now, when he was talking about pure religion, what did he say pure religion was? In part, to keep oneself unspotted from the world. Why? Because I guarantee you, if you're spiritually wise, you know the damage that sin can do. And you're going to do your dead level best to keep sin out of your life because you know how it can wreck things and muck things up and foul things up, and you don't need that in your life. And so the first priority in your life is going to be purity. In Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, one of the things that he talks about in there is how people want to go out and they want to change the world. We want to clean up the environment. We want to do away with racial injustice. We want to do all these wonderful things, noble goals. But their lives are a mess. And his advice is, and it makes sense, and it's exactly what Jesus talks about in John chapter 7, when Jesus says, listen, before you start looking at the little tiny mote that's in your brother's eye, you better get the beam out of your own eye. You better get your own room clean first. Clean up your own room, and then start worrying about everybody else's room. Before you want to clean up the world, why don't you clean up your own room? Clean up your own life. Get your life straight. And then start focusing on helping others do what you want them to do. Can you imagine the difference it would make if we were governed by people who were genuinely moral? Instead of immoral people trying to judge immoral people? Notice what he goes on to say. It's going to manifest itself in being peaceable and gentle and open to reason and full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And I got to ask the question, what if these traits characterized our House and Senate? I mean, if everybody up there was pure and peaceable and gentle and open to reason and full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, would this be a different country tomorrow? It absolutely would be, wouldn't it? Man, we wouldn't even know it. Don't tell me that the Bible's impractical or that what it teaches doesn't make a difference in people's lives, would make a positive difference in this world. As we've talked about before when we were studying the Ten Commandments, can you imagine a world where people just obeyed the Ten Commandments? I mean, really tried to just do that? To honor God, to honor their parents? And they didn't lie, and they didn't cheat, they didn't steal, they didn't covet, they didn't murder. Can you imagine how different this world would be if that were the case? Notice what he says. This results in a harvest of righteousness, sown in peace by those who make peace. Wisdom from above, brethren, produces peace. Matthew 5 verse 9, in the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called what? Sons of God. Wisdom from above is not tearing our country apart. The only thing that's going to sew our country back together is wisdom from above. It's a message of love, a message of reconciliation, a message of forgiveness, a message of mercy, a message of peace, a message of caring. That's what's going to pull our country back together. And sowing discord and bitter jealousy and selfish ambition is not going to heal it. It's not going to fix it. It's going to destroy it. It'll destroy the life of an individual. It will destroy a family. It'll destroy a society. It will. That's why this is so incredibly important, that we understand how vital it is that our lives be characterized by wisdom that is from above. Which wisdom would you like to characterize your life? You answer that question every day with the choices you make. You do. What's your choice going to be? Are you going to choose wisdom from above, or are you going to choose wisdom from beneath? Or is your life going to be a blessing, or is it going to be one that just perpetuates the curse that comes from hell? We have an opportunity, in a very real sense, to show people a little slice of heaven on earth. We do. Because when you show people peace, when you show them agape, when you show them grace, when you show them forgiveness, when you illustrate mercy, you're showing them heaven. You are. Because that's what's going to be in heaven. And they get a taste of what could be and what can be, and what a blessing that should be. Let's, as the people of God, be a people who live that wisdom that is from above. This morning, if we can help you in your walk with Him, whether it's to begin that walk as you're baptized into Christ, or you struggle in your walk and you need our encouragement and prayers, if we can help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?